Picture this. It is 6:15 in the morning and I am standing barefoot on a little tiled balcony in Tagaytay, holding a chipped blue coffee mug with both hands because the air is cooler than people imagine the Philippines can be. Somewhere below me, a rooster is making a fool of himself. A tricycle rattles past the gate. The lady next door is sweeping leaves into a pile with a broom made from stiff palm ribs, and she looks up and says, "Good morning, Sir Thomas." Sir Thomas. I almost laugh every time she says it, not because I think I deserve a title. I spent 43 years working around steel shavings, hydraulic oil, and men who would insult you for bringing the wrong kind of donuts. Nobody called me sir, but there's something in the way she says it here. It is not flattery. It is not because I'm American. It means she sees me as a grown man who still belongs to himself. That may sound like a small thing. At 81, it is not a small thing. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in my daughter's spare room outside Columbus, Ohio, with my clothes stacked in plastic tubs and my blood pressure pills lined up beside a lamp shaped like a baseball. I had to ask before changing the thermostat. I had to ask whether it was all right to fry eggs because the smell bothered my son-in-law before work. I had to ask where to put my mail when the grandkids needed the bathroom and whether somebody could drive me to the bank. I had become a guest in my own life. Now I pay my own rent. I decide when I eat. I decide when I sleep. People knock on my door because they need something from me, not because they are checking whether I have fallen. My name is Thomas Keating. Most people call me Tom. I am 81 years old, born and raised in Dayton, Ohio, and I worked as a tool and die machinist from the time I came home from the Army until my hands got too stiff to trust around a milling machine. I was married to my wife, Carol, for 52 years. 52 years. She was the kind of woman who could make a grocery list sound like a military operation. She kept every receipt labeled leftovers with dates and knew when the car needed an oil change before the little sticker in the windshield did. I used to tease her about it. Then she died, and I learned how much of my life had been held together by things I barely noticed. Cancer took her slowly. The bills came quickly. We had Medicare, supplemental insurance, and what I thought was a responsible amount of savings. I know, famous last words. There were copays, travel, medications, a hospital bed for the house, repairs we had delayed, and a roof that started leaking 6 months after the funeral. I put some of it on credit cards because I was certain I would straighten it out later. Later never came. My pension was modest. Social Security brought my monthly income to $1,912. That number is burned into my head. $1,912. My property taxes went up. Home insurance went up. The furnace quit during a February cold snap. I sold the house because there was no other honest choice. After the mortgage balance, the cards, the realtor, and the repairs the buyer demanded, I had less left than I want to admit. My daughter, Melissa, said, "Dad, come stay with us for a few months. You can get back on your feet." She meant it kindly. I want that understood. My daughter is not a villain in this story. She had a husband, 2 teenagers, a full-time job, and a father who suddenly arrived with 3 plastic tubs, a cane he claimed not to need, and no plan. The first month I told myself I was lucky. The second month I began timing my showers so I would not interfere with the morning rush. By the 4th month I was eating lunch alone in a recliner while daytime television shouted at me about medications and reverse mortgages. Then one night I heard Melissa and her husband talking in the kitchen. They were trying to be quiet. The heating vent carried every word straight into the spare room. "She cannot keep driving him everywhere," my son-in-law said. "I know," Melissa answered. "What about that assisted living place near Westerville? He will hate it. We cannot do this forever." There it was. We cannot do this forever. I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling fan. I was not angry with them. That was the worst part. They were right. They could not do it forever, and neither could I. The next morning, I told Melissa I wanted to look at senior apartments. She looked relieved, then tried to hide the relief, which made both of us feel ashamed. I tried everything people tell an older man to try. I called income-restricted buildings. The wait lists were 18 months, 2 years, sometimes longer. I looked at studios in neighborhoods where I would not have felt safe walking after sunset. I considered moving to a smaller town, but then I would have been even farther from doctors and groceries. I called one place that advertised affordable independent living. By the time they added meals, transportation, and what they called a community fee, it was more than $3,000 a month. $3,000. I had 1,912. A fellow from church suggested I rent a room from another widower. We met at a diner. He spent 20 minutes explaining that the television belonged to him and that nobody touched the thermostat except him. I had already spent months asking permission to live. I could not pay somebody for the privilege. The Philippines entered my life through a broken lawnmower. That sounds ridiculous, but it is true. My son-in-law had an old mower that would not start. I took the carburetor apart on the driveway, cleaned it, put it back together, and got the engine running. A neighbor named Ray wandered over while I was working. Ray was 67, retired from the Postal Service, and had spent 3 winters in the Philippines with his wife, who was born in Batangas. He watched me for a minute and said, "Tom, you ever think about living someplace your money still acts like money?" I told him I had no interest in Mexico. He laughed. I did not say Mexico. That afternoon, he showed me photographs on his phone. Green mountains, markets piled with fruit, a small concrete house with a red metal roof, a restaurant bill that seemed like it was missing a digit. He talked about Tagaytay, where the air was cooler, hospitals were reachable, and Manila was close enough when you needed something, but far enough that you did not have to live in the middle of it. I nodded politely and dismissed the whole idea. Then I went back to the spare room and watched videos until 2 in the morning. 1 video became 10. 10 became 50. I watched retired teachers, truck drivers, Navy men, widowers, couples, and one woman from Oregon who seemed tougher than all of them combined. Some were happy, some complained about everything, some had clearly lost their common sense the moment a young woman smiled at them, but what caught me was not the beaches, it was the apartments, regular apartments, clean, simple places. Tile floors, small kitchens, balconies, electric fans, metal gates, places where regular people lived, not rich people. I started writing numbers in a spiral notebook: rent, electricity, internet, health insurance, visa extensions, food, transportation, flights home, emergency funds. I joined 2 expat groups online and mostly kept quiet. I asked practical questions. What does a hospital visit cost? How often does the power go out? Can an 80-year-old manage without a car? Which landlords require a year in advance? How do you avoid being overcharged? What happens when you get sick and nobody knows you? The answers were not always reassuring. People warned me about scams, traffic, heat, bureaucracy, family requests for money, and men who moved too fast because they were lonely. I paid attention. Pride is not the same as foolishness. In fact, I think real pride begins when you admit what can hurt you. For 6 months, I researched. 6 months. I sold almost everything I had left. I kept photographs, Carol's wedding ring, my Army papers, 2 good shirts, a small set of hand tools, and the pocket knife my father gave me when I turned 16. I bought a one-way ticket only after setting aside enough money for a return flight and 3 months of living expenses back in Ohio. Melissa cried when I told her. She said, "Dad, people disappear over there." I said, "People disappear in spare rooms too." I regretted saying it the moment it came out. Her face changed. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. The week before I left, we barely spoke. My first breath outside the airport in Manila felt like somebody had wrapped a warm, wet towel around my head. It was midnight and the road was still alive. Horns, motorcycles, men moving luggage carts, families waiting behind barriers, the smell of exhaust, fried food, and rain on hot pavement. I had arranged a driver through the small guest house where I would stay. A man held a piece of cardboard with my name on it, spelled Tomas. I was so relieved to see it that I nearly hugged him. The drive to Tagaytay took longer than expected. Traffic crawled, then opened, then crawled again. I watched concrete buildings give way to darker roads, roadside fruit stands, and steep stretches where the engine whined. When we finally arrived, I could hear insects in the trees and dogs barking somewhere beyond the wall. My guest house room cost 1,800 pesos a night, about $31 at the exchange rate then. It had a firm bed, a humming air conditioner, a shower heater that required a switch on the wall, and a little window looking toward a row of roofs. The first morning, I drank instant coffee from a paper cup and wondered what on earth I had done. That feeling did not disappear right away. The first apartment I saw had mold behind the wardrobe. The second was beside a road so loud I could feel truck brakes in my chest. The third landlord wanted 6 months in advance. A man at a market gave me tourist prices for mangoes, and I paid because I was too embarrassed to argue. I got into the wrong jeepney once and ended up 20 minutes from where I thought I was going. My phone lost signal during a thunderstorm. The rain came down so hard it sounded like gravel on the roof. I missed Carol with an ache that felt physical. There is a dangerous hour for a widower in a new country. Mine was 4:30 in the afternoon. The day is not over, but there is nobody to tell about it. You have already walked, eaten, and checked your messages. The light changes. Couples start deciding what to have for dinner. That hour can convince you that every decision you ever made was wrong. I nearly booked a flight home during my second week. Then I found the apartment where I still live. It is on the second floor of a small building behind a family-owned hardware store. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, cream-colored walls, tile that stays cool under your feet, a balcony just wide enough for 2 plastic chairs and a table. The view is not the famous lake view people post online. I can see roofs, trees, laundry, and a slice of sky. It costs 27,000 pesos a month. At the time, that was about $470. $470. Water is usually less than $10. Internet is around $30. Electricity changes depending on how much I use the air conditioner. I do not live like a king. I am not pretending that. I keep a budget. I cook breakfast and most lunches. I take tricycles, walk when my knees agree, and pay for a driver when I have a medical appointment farther away. But after rent, utilities, food, transportation, and health expenses, there is still money left. Money left. Back in Ohio, money disappeared before the month began. The landlord's name is Arturo. He is 59 with forearms like fence posts and a habit of squinting at anything mechanical as if it has insulted his family. On my third day in the apartment, the metal gate downstairs stopped closing properly. I watched him fight with it for half an hour. Finally, I said, "Your upper hinge is pulling out of the frame." He looked at me and asked, "You know this?" I told him what I used to do. He handed me a wrench. That was the beginning. We reset the hinge, drilled new holes, and reinforced the frame. It was not a difficult job, maybe 40 minutes. When the gate swung shut without scraping, Arturo called his wife, his brother, and the young man who worked in the hardware store to come look at it. You would have thought I had built a bridge. His wife brought me a plate of pancit and a cold bottle of water. Arturo slapped my shoulder and said, "Engineer Tom." I tried to correct him. He waved me off. A week later, the neighbor asked whether I could look at a cabinet door, then a loose chair, then a window latch. I made it clear I was not running a business and did not want payment. Sometimes people brought fruit, sometimes coffee, sometimes they simply sat on the balcony and talked. For the first time since Carol died, I was useful in a way I could feel with my hands. That matters more than being entertained. It matters more than cheap rent. It may even matter more than comfort. People think pride means refusing help. At my age, that definition will ruin you. I need help. I need someone to drive me certain places. I need a doctor who explains medication slowly. I need the young woman at the phone shop to fix settings I cannot find. I need Arturo's nephew to carry a heavy water container upstairs. But here, help moves both ways. That is the difference. I help with hinges, drawers, tools, and small repairs. I show Arturo's grandson how to measure twice before cutting. I keep an eye on the store when the family eats lunch. I have coffee 3 mornings a week with 2 other retired foreigners and a Filipino former seaman named Benji, who has stronger opinions about American politics than anybody I knew in Ohio. I am not somebody's project. I am part of the exchange. Melissa did not understand that at first. For months, our calls were tense. She inspected the background on video as if looking for kidnappers. She asked whether anybody had requested money. She wanted names, addresses, copies of my lease, and the phone number of the nearest hospital. I gave her all of it. Then one Sunday, while we were talking, Arturo knocked on my door. His grandson had a school project involving a wooden frame, and they wanted to borrow my clamps. I turned the phone so Melissa could see them. Arturo's wife waved. The boy called me Grandpa Tom, which embarrassed everybody except him. After they left, Melissa was quiet. She said, "They really know you." I said, "Yes, they do." A month later, she visited. I was nervous before she came. I worried she would see every crack in the wall, every uneven sidewalk, every tangle of wires, and decide I had lost my mind. She did see those things. She also saw the guard at the market greet me. She saw the pharmacist pull my regular medicine from the shelf before I asked. She saw Benji argue with me over coffee and then insist on walking us to a restaurant because the pavement was wet. On her last evening, Melissa sat with me on the balcony. Rain had just passed. The roofs were shining, and the air smelled like wet concrete and something sweet from a neighbor's kitchen. She said, "You seem more like yourself." I asked what she meant. She said, "You make decisions again." That sentence stayed with me. You make decisions again. I had thought pride was about having money, owning a house, fixing everything without asking, and never letting your children see you afraid. I had lost the house. I did not have much money. My hands shake on bad mornings. I am afraid more often than I admit, but I make decisions. I decide which doctor I trust. I decide what I can afford. I decide who enters my home. I decide when generosity becomes pressure. I decide when to say yes and when to say no. I decide when I need help, and I ask for it without surrendering the rest of myself. The Philippines did not make me young again. It did not cure loneliness. It did not erase grief. It did not turn $1,912 into a fortune. There are frustrations here that can wear you down if you arrive expecting paradise. Paperwork takes patience. Traffic can swallow a day. Heat can exhaust you. You must be careful with money, relationships, and your health. You need an exit plan. You need emergency savings. You need to listen more than you talk. But this place gave me room in my budget, room in my days, room to be useful, room to be seen as an adult instead of a problem waiting for a solution. That is how I got my pride back, not through luxury, not through romance, not because people treat me like some rich foreigner. I got it back through ordinary things, paying rent on time, carrying my own groceries, repairing a hinge, choosing my breakfast, hearing a knock at the door, and knowing someone came because my presence has value. Tomorrow morning I will step onto the balcony around 6:15. The rooster will probably start before I am ready. A tricycle will rattle past the gate. The woman next door will sweep her leaves and look up. "Good morning, Sir Thomas," she will say, and I will lift my chipped blue mug and answer her, "Good morning," because it is.